Well, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's good evening. It is Tuesday, June 20th, 6 o'clock. Welcome to the Newfane Selectboard meeting. We have Ann Golob, Katie Johnson-Aplin, and myself, Angela Sanborn here. Absent is Mike Fitzpatrick and Jeff Chevalier. Has this meeting been properly warned?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any additions or amendments to the agenda? Anyone?
No, none.
No. Great. And now we're moving on to the approval of the minutes from the June 5th, 2023 regular select board meeting. Is there a motion to accept?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Katie. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. And good evening, Jay. We are ready for the road foreman and commissioners report.
Okay. So I met with Ron Bell and Scott Jensen at the culvert on Eddy Road. Ron Bell had drawings done for the meeting, and he'll be making some changes as per the meeting. Basically, we had him change the alignment so it's aligned with the stream a little better, and had to make it a little longer because of that. So he's going to make those changes and get the plans back and try to come up with an engineer's estimate so we have some idea what we're going to need to look for money. That was the one that emergency management said to call them when we had an estimate and plans for. So I'll do that once we have something, just because it's washed that hill out so many times that she thought it might be a priority to do. So we'll see if they are able to find any money. The white lines on the pavement were done last week. Depot Road box culvert, Renault Brothers has submitted the shop drawings for the cement box and was waiting to hear back before starting to make the box. So I tried to call both the guys from the state today just to see where they were, and I couldn't get an answer from either. So I think he's just on hold until they get stuff back to him. I'll keep trying. And the gravel pit, not much has changed. Bill Jules sent a map of the pit that showed the first phase, and I haven't had anything else lately. He was working on the application itself also. I don't know how far he was. He said he had a draft of the application done, but I haven't seen it yet. I got the small scale V-Trans grant application submitted last week, and the grant for the Newfane Village sidewalk design construction was submitted the week before.
Great. Is there a motion to accept the road foreman and commissioners report?
I make such a motion.
A second.
I'll second it.
Discussion.
I
Katie.
have a question. What's the timeline for the paving that's supposed to happen on Grimes Hill?
We got to put it out to bid. I'm trying to figure out how to write it up so it's clear to whoever's bidding on it. That will just be patching, like milling out really bad spots and patching.
Okay.
We don't have money enough to do all of it.
Right.
It'll be some temporary work until hopefully next year the whole thing could be paved.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you talk about the gravel pit? Can we put any, pressure's not the right word, but begging to Bill Jules, our intense desire to see this done? So we can get
Yes.
Expedite.
He said the last time I talked with him, which was a week and a half or so ago, that barring any other emergencies, he was focused on this. So I don't know quite what that means, but I will, I can poke him up again and see what his schedule is looking like now.
That would be good.
Thank you.
It'll be 2 years in the fall. I really would love to see it.
Yeah.
Really.
I have a question. Is there an update on the South Wardsboro Road issue with the Davis's property?
Yep. I talked to Green Mountain Power. They said next year they could probably move the poles, but the landowner would have to pay for it.
No.
That's nothing it's a fairly new line, and so it's nothing they're willing to move for free.
Okay.
And he didn't have an estimate, but he said it'd be well over 5,000 to move those. And I looked again, what we had planned there, I'm not sure the poles are going to make that big a difference. You know, we're talking about, you know, putting a ditch line in over there and so forth. I think we can do it without moving the poles. So the more of the safety part of it is the corner just above there that needs to come out. That's going to be a little more elaborate, and there's no poles on that side there. They switched the side of the road.
Okay. And have you talked to John?
I haven't. We were driving back and forth hauling by there today, but I didn't get a chance to stop and talk to him. He seems to be working on his barn a lot, so I'll swing up when I've got the pickup.
All right, thank you. I'll take a moment to welcome Jeff Chevalier to our meeting. Good to see you. He is on via Zoom.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else for the road foreman and commissioners report? If not, all those in favor to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, ayes have it. Thank you so much, Jay, and thank the crew for all your hard work. It's much appreciated. And good evening, Juanetta. Glad to have you, and it is time for the administrative assistance report.
Good evening. There's the animal control contract for review and signing tonight. We are one of 8 towns that are participating in using the services that they provide. And I feel that Ashley does a remarkable job. Very much appreciate her time and services. Underneath my report is the breakdown of what we pay compared to the other towns, and it's done by population. So that's just for your review. And then Steve Levine has submitted Eben Vines as a New Williamsville Hall committee member. We would need to have a motion to accept and appoint the new member. And then as a postscript, Thursday, June 22nd, the Williamsville Hall is having a breakfast from 8 to 10:30. And on Friday, June 23rd at 6:30, they're having a spaghetti dinner and a movie to follow at 7:30. And I think it had something to do with it's a delightful movie about an Italian immigrant brother who opens their dream restaurant on the Paradise on the Jersey Shore. It's a family rated movie, so anybody that would like to attend, I think the dinner was like $10 and it included the movie.
And what time is the breakfast?
The breakfast is from 8 to 10:30.
And the dinner starts at?
The dinner starts at 6:30 and the movie is at 7:30 if you just want to go for the movie.
Excellent. Is there a motion to approve the administrative assistance report?
I make a motion.
Second?
A second.
Just
Discussion?
one other. On the third page, this needs to be signed for the treasurer tonight. It's
Okay.
the new pay increase schedule.
Do you want me to use this one?
I think I have one that I thought I had one.
I can use this one.
All right, thank you.
Any discussion on the administrative assistance report?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm definitely all in favor of our animal control person, but just tell me, how many incidents has she dealt with for us in the last year, do you know? And what types of incidents they were, I'm just curious about.
There's been a few that are nuisance calls. There's been a couple that were at large. I know there was an incident over on Blueberry Circle that she visited 2 or 3 times. And she's also been helping to encourage people to register their dogs. So she's been doing quite a bit of work there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And do we get reports of what she's doing for our town, the way we do with the sheriff?
I can ask her for one. I don't usually get a summary page for her.
I would be curious to just, at least even on a quarterly basis.
Sure.
What it's looking like.
Sure.
Just to have a better sense of what kind of issues we're having here in town.
I thought we had asked for that last year.
Did we?
I thought we
I
had.
don't remember. You may be right.
I know that Mark Anderson is away at training, but he's scheduling a meeting in July with all of the participating towns. So I'll definitely bring that up there too. But I'll send Ashley an email requesting, some sort of summary page.
He's a meeting regarding specifically animal control.
Yes,
That's what he's all
Yes.
Can you let us know when that is?
absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So
So we need to hold a vote to,
make a motion to sign the contract, and it looks like one signature.
I make a motion for Angela Sanborn, Chair, to sign the paperwork for the animal control officer this evening.
I second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, sorry. Okay. And then a motion to sign the town of Newfane wage increase for the fiscal year 2024. And we all sign that one. Is there a motion?
I made such a motion, sorry.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Excellent.
Do we also need to
Make a motion
make a
to
motion for
appoint.
Evan?
Are you making such a motion?
I make a motion to appoint Evan as a new Williamsville Hall committee member.
Second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Ayes have it. All right. And any further discussion on the administrative assistance report? Hearing none, all those in favor to accept, please say aye.
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 And the ayes have it again. Thank you so much, Juanetta.
Thank you.
Any committee reports? I see that Jane has signed on. Do you have an update or anything?
Not much of an update as a request. We have 2 openings on the planning commission now. We need some more people because with only 3 of us there, if one of us isn't there, we don't have a quorum. So we had to cancel our last meeting because Nolan was out of town. So if you know anyone who wants to be on the planning commission, please sign them up.
Okay, send them your way. Okay, well, thank you, Jane. And we're moving right along this evening. I see that Dan is here. Good evening, Dan. Good to see you. And I see Diana is also here. We're going to move right along to the scheduled members of the public. We have Dan Mallach from DuBois and King for the Streetscape scoping study.
Excellent. Thank you very much, members of the select board and other presenters and guests this evening. I will want to share my screen if that's not set up yet to do it. I'd appreciate it. Thanks very much. Great. And
We'll let you present and then have questions after. Does that sound good?
sure, or honestly, Angela, if as we go along and there's a page of the report that we're on, you want to chime in, that'd be just fine.
Perfect.
Thank you for letting me share my screen there. Can you all see that cover page?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. I might be looking over to this direction because that's where it is on a second screen if I'm looking over there. But basically this evening, I'll be stepping through a little bit of the process we went through to get the final document, how it worked. And at the end of it, I'm going to ask for a motion from the select board to accept the report. You don't need to approve it. I know based on some of this, some of the work Jay has already just mentioned in terms of the funding is already moving forward, which is absolutely fine. And then I'll close the loop later just in case the town needs to sign off that it's been accepted by the select board, but it'd be good if the minutes reflect that at the end. I'll also just say up front, we had some personnel changes on our end that made certain aspects of this challenging to you folks from a continuity standpoint. We want to respect that and honor it. And I just want to thank you from my heart for your patience with us. But I think as you'll see, it's a really great, robust report with some wonderful information. And it was a pleasure to pick up the ball on our end and work on it on your behalf. So table of contents sort of shows the breadth. I'll just stop here for a moment. A scoping study has a lot of specific steps that the Agency of Transportation asks as part of the study. And so all of those are reflected in each of these aspects of the table of contents, which will move through in terms of existing conditions and exploration of alternatives and public outreach. And the important thing about a scoping study is that when Newfane is seeking funding for something, such as from the Agency of Transportation or other state agencies, they do want to see that this process has been gone through and has been documented. And so it's in fact a requirement to get some of the funding that Jay and you all are seeking right now. Overview pages, we don't need to spend a lot of time on where the study area is, but bottom line, it's within this dotted area from just about Loop Road on the south end. So south, and all of the illustrations we're going to be looking at is going to be to the left, and the north end just past Lost Mile Automotive. And what we're seeing here up front on this page is what was ultimately decided as the preferred alternative. And we'll talk a little later about some of the process as to, how we got there. The existing conditions, by the way, this is a photo from the site visit, which was undertaken in July of last year. So we've been working on this project for just about a year to get to this point. We do want to look at the surrounding land uses. That's important in terms of where are we trying to make connections and safe connections, or what are the critical places for crossings as well, to understand in the pink, for example, that these are commercial uses, understanding the residential uses from the standpoint if a new sidewalk is going in, for example, that it might encroach somewhat, even if it's in the right of way, in the public right of way, and there is the public right to work within it, that nonetheless, these are residences and these are their yards and what they perceive as their personal space, even if it includes this easement area that's called a right of way. And of course, the many institutional and civic uses in and around the village, which are represented in blue. We also take a deeper dive. Here is the public right-of-way, which varies a little bit. 49.5 feet is standard. That's what's called 3 rods. Going back eons, 16 and a half feet is 1 rod. A lot of the roads in Vermont are 3 rods, and it looks like a little further portions of it just north of the post office are actually based on old diagrams and legal information we found in the lower left is somewhere around 3.5 rods. Of course, we looked at the existing condition of the infrastructure and where we're trying to make connections, where we have good connections, of course, where you did recent work up on Court and West Streets. They look excellent, and it would be wonderful to emulate similar quality along these portions of Main Street. Of course, you already have many existing sidewalks along Main Street, which are undermined because of grade changes, perhaps, or their width could be improved, or perhaps tree roots have, pushed up on them in some locations. All this at least as well as we do. Here are just some photographs of that, for example. Wyndham Regional Commission has also done studies along Main Street looking at, pedestrian crossings, and they did do a study that was documented in 2019. We think there are at least as many crossings, and they also realized that one of their cameras might not have even caught all the crossings near Court Street. So Regional Commission definitely supports the use of crosswalks and other methods to get people safely in and around the village. So that's very useful. Little history of the crosswalks and some of these photos in Newfane. It's always enjoyable to kind of take a deep dive, and it also helps support if there is something new. You can point to, the history of sidewalks rather in and around the village. Of course, we're looking at intersections and what's called access management, and the post office and the Newfane store are the classic examples of where access to those buildings need management in terms of how vehicles should safely park, how they should access the parking, how they should orient themselves when they're parking, and the relationship between vehicles and the parking and the entrances to the store as well. And we'll particularly focus as we move forward on the Newfane store, because I had the opportunity to talk in person with David Hull about that. Roadway data is part of it. There's not a lot of fine-grained issue about crashes per se, but there is a great deal of average daily traffic. This 2020 count, of course, is a little lower than the 2022 count because fewer people were traveling during the beginnings of COVID. We look at existing utilities. These can also be very important. In the next stage with the funding, that's where you get the construction engineers to do the fine-grained design, and knowing where these utilities are going to be very important, as much as locating, but also the digging portion. And of course, there'd be marking before any digging is going to be done just for safety, but this does help give a certain idea of what types of underground subsurface utilities, as well as utility poles, might be in the way of sidewalk route. And the street trees, which contribute so much to the character of the village, are critical. Based on our analysis and my looking in the field, I'm also a certified arborist, in addition to being a licensed landscape architect and planner. So these are near and dear to me. Certain trees have certain impacts to the root system. A sugar maple reacts differently to having its roots severed or having the compaction of a sidewalk over it than even a red maple might. They're far more sensitive, and they're more sensitive to piled snow. So it does not appear that any of the new sidewalk areas or even a widened existing sidewalk would adversely impact existing trees such that any would have to be removed. But there is a degree of care that can be taken during construction in terms of when or if roots are encountered during excavation for a new sidewalk, that they're cut flush, that they're covered if a backfill isn't going to go in quickly with at least a plastic bag to retain moisture, and then the backfill is done. Even something as simple as that flush hand cut rather than a shred by a bobcat can make a big difference in terms of the ability of funguses or insects to get into that shredded root or that clean cut root, which the tree is much better at healing over. Environmental resources, a lot of this is desktop level mapping using the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources Atlas software, which is available to anybody and is actually a lot of fun to look at, looking at properties, property ownership, the presence of wetlands, different soil types, topography, what have you. It's actually a really useful tool. And when I say fun, I do enjoy doing it. And that some of that is reflected here. Flood hazard information is also important, obviously, from a public safety standpoint. We don't think any of the work in sidewalks and crosswalks that are shown or recommended in this report intersect with environmental features in a negative way, but it's important, simply to be aware of it. And again, it's part of the VTrans process to look at these things. Cultural resources, we partnered with a firm called Hartgen Archaeological Associates to look at both the history of some of the wonderful village buildings, as well as to evaluate whether there might be archaeological resources that could be adversely impacted. The bottom line answer is no, nothing obvious. However, like in front of Davidson House, there is an old stone wall there. And so a degree of care does and should be taken and is recommended in their 2 reports as you go through any work. And we thought this was really neat. This photograph to the left, the store about in 1890 and today. Public input is critical. There's what's called a local concerns meeting. It doesn't mean that folks are necessarily concerned, but it's trying to draw out information from people about their feelings of what is important about safe sidewalk connections and crosswalks in Newfane Village. And one of the things we heard also in the first accompanying survey, you see here on the bottom, people drive too fast through the village. And that is a big part of making sure that people can walk safely off the road and that crossings are clear and that they're obvious. Another up here in the green, this 43.2%, where do you think crossing is most urgently needed? And that would be at what's now the Newfane store, of course. And where should Newfane invest in updates? The blue, which garnered over half of, in this case, 89 responses to this first survey, is create sidewalks on both sides of the roadway throughout the village. And so we'll see some of that's refurbishing, restoring existing sidewalks, and in a few targeted locations, creating new sidewalk. The purpose and need is, sort of the basic justification that VTrans wants for these studies and to improve pedestrian comfort and safety in Newfane Village. And the need is that there aren't any crosswalks and some portions of the existing sidewalk need to be upgraded. And there are some critical areas where new sidewalk would be very useful. We created 4 design concepts. The first one is the no build, but it always needs to be put out there. Certainly doing nothing except perhaps the normal predicted planned routine maintenance, and that could include certainly improving some of the existing sidewalks. Certainly it's the lowest cost. It's always put out as an option. I'll spend a little more time on this page. We have many other pages that go into detail, but you can see as we step through these 3 concepts, the low cost, the orange are existing sidewalks to restore. The green are critical areas where new sidewalk would potentially be useful. We thought at a minimum, those would be most useful. And then 3 crossings here are shown at Loop Road and there at Jail Street and at the Newfane store. What we're calling Historic Plus introduces, you'll see these 2 blue lines that go through. That was actually the concept where a full 5-foot wide bike lane would be included on both sides. And you can imagine, though, the impact that might have on parking. And if you also have the sidewalks here that are shown, yard impact. So you're starting to see some of the trade-offs that might happen in addition to some increased cost. And this one also shows 4 crosswalks, although I'll mention that this 4th crosswalk that's added by Fayetteville Corner is less than the minimum 200 feet that VTrans requires from a crosswalk offset. And so that'll come up later when we talk about the preferred alternative. And the full investment shows all of these new sidewalk restorations, this additional bit of new sidewalk up at the north end of Main Street, across from the Lost Mile, and also sidewalk in front of WW Building Supply. It shows 5 crossings. The one here across from the post office is the additional on this. Any questions right here? Actually, this would be a fine time just to pause if you do have any questions about how these concepts were developed. Okay, great. Well, hearing none, what ultimately happened is we engaged in an exercise. And of course, we looked at some challenge areas. And here's what we also did to take sections on how they would look relative to the right-of-way in different areas, from the low cost, by the bank, north of Fayetteville Corner, at the post office, at the store. This is just one idea for parking, this angled parking coming in off Cemetery Hill. And then we stepped through a similar exercise with the Historic Plus. You see those are the 2 bike lanes that are added. But in some cases, you see here north of Fayetteville Corner, how far out due to sort of slope and geometry, a concrete sidewalk may have to be to accommodate it. And so that would have required agreement with the property owners to allow the sidewalk and potentially a negotiation to that end. The Historic Plus again there. Here's another aspect view of the store, also parking, but the angle of the parking is a little less, so you can fit one fewer parking spaces. In the full investment, we introduced this idea of the raised crosswalk, which actually turned out to be popular with members of the steering committee that reviewed this. And we stepped through similar, no bike lanes, but a similar idea for each. And here's the impact of each on parking. And this turned out to be very critical. There's the strong sentiment that the existing parking is sometimes barely enough to accommodate people in the right locations, you know, along the street. And so the no build, obviously, that's the existing, the purple, where there are on-street parking spaces now. The low cost would have kept much of it, except in front of the Fat Crow. Historic Plus, though, with those bike lanes and the wider pavement width is really where, you know, we would start losing a significant amount of parking. And the full investment concept only in front of Village Yoga is where parking could feasibly remain. Public meeting number 2. There was a snowstorm that evening. We weren't able to make it in person, so it was entirely on Zoom. Public survey summary. We were frankly disappointed in the 17 respondents, although the information we received was consistent with the first. Sometimes this happens. There had just been a survey, any number of reasons why fewer people might respond to a survey. But we didn't find anything, even among those respondents to this survey, that differed from what we were hearing about 3-foot wide shoulders, for example, here instead of bike lanes. So that was a critical choice area because bike lanes have to be 5 feet wide, you know, by law to be called a bike lane and for safety. So an overwhelming number of people felt that 3-foot wide shoulders would be acceptable. And some type of walkability and safety improvement, over 94% of these respondents supported that. So that's always very good to see. We did do what's then also called this alternatives comparison matrix, where we take everything we've learned, how each of these 4 alternatives, including the no build, would impact pedestrian safety or improve pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, traffic calming. For example, number 3 here, that would include the raised crosswalk to help slow traffic. Yard impacts, very important. Conceptual costs, you'll see these were actually based on a prior VTrans document. You'll see in the final costs for the preferred alternative, it's even a little higher because we're basing it on brand new information submitted to us by VTrans or sent to us. And as you can imagine, cost of everything is going up, not least concrete and labor. Utility impacts, we're looking, what might have to be moved for each. Parking impact, obviously the highest score went to the no build because there'd be no impact on parking. The lowest score went to that full investment when only the parking, I think it's 2 or 3 spaces in front of Village Yoga, would remain. And then the surveys and the support, and that all goes into a final score. And this is a tool. This isn't saying, well, therefore Newfane should do Historic Plus, even though that got the highest score in this methodology, in part perhaps because, you know, the survey, at least the first survey, got a lot of positive about it. So this is the preferred design concept. And I just want to briefly pop into Photoshop to show what we did as a committee. And in Photoshop, we did a live exercise that ultimately brought all the concepts together and allowed us in real time to say, oh, move the crosswalk here. And so I can actually click on a crosswalk line, and we were actually doing this. We were moving things around. We were thinking about sections of sidewalk. I had these sidewalks set up. You see down at the end here at Loop Road, we can turn it on, we can turn it off. We can add flashing beacons in various places or take them off. We could move sidewalk around, and we could also make sure that all the parking that we want is still in place. So I had set this up in Photoshop, then we were able to hop in for about 45 minutes and do this live to come up with what's called the preferred alternative. Sometimes the preferred alternative is either A, B, or C. It's either, in this case, the low cost, the historic plus, or the full investment. In this case, it just made sense from everything we were hearing that, well, we want this and this and this, and we want to keep parking. Crosswalks in certain places are critical, so let's do what we did there. And to support this preferred design concept, and so this is what we have ultimately. We do have a crossing with flashing beacons because it's essentially a mid-block crossing. Those flashing beacons are required at that place, or it's particularly useful. Don't know that they're required, but we felt coming in from the south, whatever we can do to alert motorists to the fact that they're arriving at the village in an area where people might be walking, the better. And so we have actually little curb bump outs at this location. We have the flashing beacons. We have the crosswalk, and this green in front of the Fat Crow, that's new sidewalk that we're recommending based on all the feedback we heard. And we have 5 crosswalks shown, but this alt here is only if the one in front of the Newfane store, which is a raised crosswalk, wouldn't be possible. That's an alternative location. So this is what you have here. You have in the orange existing sidewalks that could be refurbished. You have new sections of sidewalk, not every section that we discussed. You'll see that little section across from Lost Mile isn't in on this. It didn't seem as necessary, at least in the short term. And WW Building Supply, part of it is, the drainage ditch and any number of other things. It didn't seem as necessary if we had the sidewalk across the street on the post office and Fat Crow side and could get there. So that's the preferred alternative that then is documented. And this still doesn't mean that Newfane has to do this. And the monies that you're requesting now certainly don't need to do all this at once. This is simply part of the process to document, what we've come to at this point. In the next few years, things could change. For example, different funding could come in and you can do this piecemeal, or frankly, not at all. That's your choice. But we did think it useful to illustrate some of the sort of before and after to help people in the community who were or even weren't part of the process understand where some of the investment the town will be making might be going. And so in the upper right is the existing condition, and the larger image, you see one of the crosswalks that was in the preferred alternative. That's this one right here at Weston Jail, right? We have the flashing beacons, and we have a refurbished sidewalk here on the east and a new sidewalk along the portion of the common on the west. Here's another one close up of the common on the west, and a bench. Sometimes doing this, it's so specific, people think it's going to look exactly like this, but you don't have to choose this bench. In fact, I'd recommend a bench perhaps that has arms because it's useful for some people, but sometimes we're at the mercy of what images are available to us online to populate these. And here we are at Loop Road. And here you see the sidewalk connection coming in down from the Fat Crow on the left. You see the rapid beacons. You also see the bump outs here, which can double as stormwater management features as well. And you could also color the crosswalk. Now, all of this document went to VTrans and they had it for about 6 weeks. About a dozen people review it. And then they send them back to us with all of their comments. And they're really actually pretty excellent, including the VTrans landscape architect, Bonnie Donahue. But they noted we originally had this crosswalk painted green. And they said, well, that's the color we use for bike lanes sometime. Maybe you've seen them along the sides of roads in various communities. And so we changed it to red. You would still need to work through VTrans for approval. There's some question whether, this is, permitted state road. They might prefer the blocks. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But the bottom line is we want to make sure that this is an attractive gateway. They also noticed, just for the record, that this bridge, which would be necessary over the drainage swale or ditch along that side of the road would have to adhere to all proper standards, and that this sort of whimsical version might not. Fair point. Any questions about these simulations?
I have a question about this one.
Yeah.
That little bridge-like structure that you built, is that leading to another sidewalk?
Right, exactly. So this could extend right up to Loop Road, along Loop Road. Exactly. That is what we're showing. And that's what we heard. Mhm.
So it could, but it doesn't have to. I'm just trying to clarify, to have a crosswalk, is it required to have a sidewalk on both sides of the road?
Yes.
Right. Yes, that is true. It wouldn't have to extend any further really than we're showing it even in this area. There might have to be at least some sort of landing place. Exactly. Yeah. And that's a critical consideration. I think there were one or two other areas where that came into play. For example, this crossing here could not happen to the post office if this green section of sidewalk were not built. Thank you.
But I'm sorry, just to focus, I'm sorry, I'm asking this not so much because of this implementation, but in another part of town where this has become a concern. Is there a requirement for how long that additional piece of sidewalk needs to be on the right-hand side of the screen? Or is just that it
30
needs a-
feet or?
Is it just that it needs like a landing, or is there a specific number of feet?
Let me get back to you all on that, and hopefully the information can get into everybody. I'm sorry, who is asking that?
And Golob.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to know the answer to that myself. I don't know. I have heard it can be as much as a landing with the sidewalk to happen later, but that even that landing itself might have to have a certain area for both, ADA requirements and to have enough opportunity for someone to safely then walk elsewhere, even if there isn't a formal sidewalk yet.
Okay. That'd be really helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, good. And for you and me both. Thank you. Great, thank you. And these would be push button. There are some motion sensing, but these would be push button activated. That's the most typical kind of these rectangular flashing beacons is what they're called, but they can definitely be solar powered. So here we are at the store at the end of March. Well, it was recognized while we were going through part of this process that these three illustrations that were up above had not received sufficient input from David Hull at all. We hadn't yet met in person with him, simply to talk about how vehicles do sort of go around his site, what his loading area needs are, some of the backup concerns, really nitty gritty. So I went down with my daughter, we took a trip, and he was very gracious with his time. And this is what we came up with based on some striping that he'd already started to do just with paint on his store. And so recognizing that there was still a need for a shoulder, we do here at the bottom show the sidewalk area. And what was the most important thing we heard from him is that he'd much prefer vehicles come in from jail and exit one way, exit at Cemetery Hill. It just makes a lot more sense to have people come in and out. And in also putting in a sidewalk, it's very important. You see these lines in front of the cars, those are curb stops or wheel stops. So vehicles don't overhang the sidewalk, which you probably see places, and then people with strollers or using wheelchairs or even just two people side by side can't use the full width of the sidewalk. So that was critical. We also found, he showed us in his store, hanging up there is this photograph in the upper right where we have 7 cars in the photo facing 5 different directions. So this isn't new. Yeah, right. This isn't new that there've been some issues here, in terms of parking, but both putting in the sidewalk and the wheel stops will prevent the people that, as you know, come straight in from the road into parking and then exit whichever way they, came in from or the other way. So this seems to be particularly useful to try to, safely channel motor vehicle access in a good way. And this circle here is a well. David is thinking about trying to shrink the footprint of this above ground structure to maybe just bollards around it. And that would make it a little easier because depending on how these parking spaces are ultimately striped, the full backup distance that's typically required, such as behind this red car, isn't available to that vehicle. And so either extra care would have to be taken in the meantime, or hopefully he'll be able to do that. I think it's just a difference of a foot or two if he's able to shrink that footprint. Any questions on that? And what we also see here is the raised crosswalk of the preferred alternative to help orient you and connect you into the existing sidewalk system, which is shown in a deeper gray. The new sidewalk is the sort of yellow gray.
Katie, do you have a question?
I just had a thought, you know, how in some shorter parking lot spaces, they write compact for short cars, for little cars. Maybe something like that could be done in that space without him having to move a well.
Great. I'll be sending this to David, the final, with a hard copy too, with my thanks for his time. And I'll note that to him, that could be a solution. I'll research it first if the backup distance can also be reduced in addition to sort of the depth of the space itself, which can be reduced. Maybe the backup distance by law can also be reduced at the same time. Yeah, that'd be useful. Thanks very much. On the lower right, we see that whoever took the photo in 1948 also, or after, wrote down some of the names of the cars, like the 41 Packard and the Woody, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all in the document.
I have a question about the raised pedestrian crosswalk.
Yeah.
Were we looking at the possibility of having some raised areas to try to slow traffic? One of the pieces of feedback we got from other communities was concerned about the noise as cars were going over these bumps. Is it different in this design because it's larger, so you don't get the boom, boom sound with each car going over it, which, as I understand, and I'm sure I'd experienced myself, can be extraordinarily annoying to the people living nearby?
Sure. Yeah. The raised crosswalk is really just 6 or 8 inches high, but it's about 15 to 20 feet long. So it's a much shallower. It still works to slow and calm traffic and alert motorists so that something different is happening. But this isn't a speed hump.
Okay.
That might only be 4 or 5 feet wide, that has a much faster rise and fall. And so I do think that this feature would be a lot less noisy as a result of a much shallower slope for its entire distance. Are you discussing a specific width, a type, or a speed hump or bump as opposed to a raised? This almost sometimes is called a table, really like this.
Not discuss the table, did we? But it was the humps and bumps that we were discussing.
We were talking about temporary speed bumps in a different village in town.
Right.
And quickly shot it down because of the noise. But I know we did really like this table idea in the discussions earlier.
Right.
You said you thought that it did not have the sound, and from the design it sounds like it's likely it would not. But could you just verify for us that the sound concern is not there, just so we're going into this fully knowledgeable?
Yep. Thank you.
Yes.
Hopefully there is research beyond anecdotal evidence from what we've heard. That's not necessarily good enough when you're talking to people about it. But I do like the temporary notion of what you were considering elsewhere, because that does make sure, you know, you're putting it in the right place potentially. Or, you know, if you do decide that even that form makes too much noise, yes, you can quickly take it out. Another advantage of, you know, this wider, shallower table, of course, is plowing. It's a lot more plow friendly, if you will, than sometimes a narrower structure with a much steeper rise to the top and down again. And that's always, of course, a consideration. This report, Yeah. Mhm.
One last question.
Yeah.
Is that raised crosswalk, the only one that I'm familiar with is over by Keene State College? Would it be as steep as that one is? That one's seems abrupt to me, but it doesn't seem like it's 20 feet wide.
I think this would be wider than that
It
one.
seems like it, yeah. I was just wondering if you've been to Keene.
I was in Keene today, and too bad we didn't talk last night, but that's okay. But I'll be going down again soon, and I'll measure it, and if I can figure out its height, either with talking from someone down there or a little research, I'll do just that. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. That's the only example that I know of that I drive through on a semi-regular basis, but it
Great.
doesn't seem to bother the college campus at all.
Different audience, and who knows? There are obviously a lot of different ways to build this, depending on we've all been over some very high speed humps too, and say, that's interesting. I don't think it has to be. So the real purpose is to alert drivers that this is something different, and it doesn't take a lot in the environment to do that in combination with a crosswalk. The last thing we want to do is, of course, give pedestrians a false sense of security, that this is some great structure that makes them so much taller or more visible. But it's really a change in the environment can go a long way in slowing motorists down. And that's its real intent, with the additional striping. And, the change in the surface is enough to register to a motorist that, this is a different kind of area.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for telling me about the one at Keene State College. Next.
Remind me what we said about with this design, the preferred design, where are we with bike lanes? There are no bike lanes, am I correct?
That is correct. Yeah, you have pretty much the existing shoulders, which do get very narrow in some places, especially in the north. But I think the feeling was that there wasn't enough public support for them. And the fact that to use mostly the existing area within the right of way for 2 5-foot wide bike lanes or 10 feet meant such a potential loss of parking that the trade-off didn't seem to be a positive.
Okay.
Yeah. The rest of the report is a little bit about sort of the next steps, to the extent that there needs to be more coordination with VTrans. Now's the time, and of course they're aware of it. And I will say that the Wyndham Regional Commission are excellent folks. Matt Batchelor was the overseer of this particular project, and he's a resource for, permitting needs and, how to navigate some of the funding sources, what have you. So it's not all on Jay's shoulders, for example. But some of it might also be in places where there could be newer refurbished sidewalks, simply reaching out with landowners to talk to them about, sort of that public good that a sidewalk provides. But we do talk about a number of funding areas. I think Jay mentioned that this bike ped grant small scale is what he's applied for just recently, and that's excellent. AARP is actually another fantastic, non-governmental source of monies. And this $20,000 can actually go a long way, and it does not require a match, where you see that fairly substantial, in some cases, match is required for a lot of other funding sources. And again, WRC, fantastic people to help through this process.
Do we have sort of a back of the envelopes estimate of what we think this?
Yeah, we'll do you slightly one better. And on the right side of this page, we actually went through, and all these item numbers you see down on the left hand are specific VTrans numbers. They have about a 12-page document with all of these numbers for everything from the flashing beacons to traffic control, which of course will be necessary additional granite curbing, the excavation required for sidewalks, removing and resetting utility poles. We also added a few things, 3 benches, for example, but that could also be something that the town could outreach to people to donate. Memorial bench, and there are other ways that you could have capacity as a community to defray some of these kinds of costs. We add in $1,000 for tree protection. Now, even though we don't think that beyond what might be necessary during construction to minimize root impacts, any trees would be removed, but it would still be useful to run orange construction fencing at the outer edge of any construction area, simply so that no materials or equipment inadvertently get stored over a root system and causes this kinds of soil compaction that can adversely impact. We include seed, $1,500 at $15 a pound for grass seed. So when a sidewalk comes in, there's always that area, even if you're, just widening an existing sidewalk where you need to add in additional grass seed. Flagging, concrete, the rain garden bump outs, are all in here, and including local project management and design, and construction inspection, all of which are 15% of those sort of individual costs, and a 25% contingency. And so these are the most recent that I mentioned we received from VTrans, these numbers, but you still add on. So you have all these add-ons, which really make things add up. So the base cost is about $415,000 if we're just talking current dollars for full construction of the entire preferred alternative that we showed you, all those crosswalks, the sidewalk rehabilitation and new sidewalk, the flashing beacons, what have you. Contingency of 25% brings that to a construction cost of right around $500,000. When you add in the project management and design and inspection, that's another $200,000 or so, bringing everything that we're aware of, including the contingency, which looks several years out, that 25%, knowing costs go up. So give it another 25%, that's $700,000.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
It's Jay. We applied for the large scale one, so it was.
Oh, you did.
With the easements, it was like 704, I think was what we applied for.
That's right. You called me about the easement cost,
Yes.
and we added on to that. Good. I appreciate it. And you went for the large. Okay.
Yes.
Well, excellent. Good luck. And that's a smaller match percentage, but obviously that would still be a very significant match from the community. Yeah. Oh, thanks for that clarification, Jay. Good. Appreciate it. We also talk about permitting in this document. NEPA is the Environmental Protection Act of 1960, I think it is, or 66. For a project like this, we do think it's likely that some documentation might have to be done, but a letter that's often a couple pages called a categorical exclusion should fit the bill. The one that's almost always required is the state highway access permit. But I have that up here. It's not very long. It's this with a lot of information about what definitions are, and you'll see down here the actual fee for things like sidewalks. Let's see, right down here. There are other types of permits for which a fee is not required, and that includes sidewalks and that kind of thing. And so at least the fee part shouldn't add materially to the overall cost, although of course it's another hoop to jump through. And the folks at Wyndham Commission can definitely help navigate that part of the process. And again, the appendices, I mentioned the traffic count summary that Wyndham Regional Commission did. I misspoke, that's 2022, not 2019. The 2 surveys, that's where we found some of the photographs, for example. They're actually really interesting reads because Hartkin went up and down the entirety of that box project area, talking about the history of a lot of the buildings and photographing them and going back in some earlier photos from earlier surveys that were done. It's actually a really very interesting read. And the archaeological survey, even while it didn't show potential for sensitivity in the project area, it still includes some kind of cool older maps and a neat read. And you all have that. At least it was sent to the town for you to, peruse. Just to confirm, did you receive this final document?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. And if you are viewing it as a PDF, by the way, there are a few areas, especially like State of Vermont Natural Resources Board, if it's highlighted in blue like that, or all of these grant resources, this will take you directly to the either AARP or agency website where it has the information, including numbers you can call to find out more, and they'll help step you through, all of these grant funding and other options and resources for you. And it does seem a little overwhelming. You wonder why they have, all these different grants with all these different names and acronyms. But once you're in that universe, of course, it's really helpful, even though it is some fair amount of upfront work, as Jay can attest to. Any other questions about this as we're here?
Can you forward to us this email so that we have the link? So we can
Yes.
just click it.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'm excited.
Is there anyone, I can't see anyone online if they have any questions?
Nothing on chat.
It's incredibly exciting for us, frankly, to work with a community that, as we're even completing this, is already, seeking the funding and moving forward on it. And so kudos. Great job.
What do you need from the board this evening again?
We only ask for a motion that the board has accepted the document. You don't need to vote on the preferred alternative or any of the particular recommendations or approve it. Simply that DuBois and King has presented it, and as a board, you've accepted the document.
I make such a motion.
I second it.
Great. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 There you have it. Dan?
Thank you.
All in favor?
Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
So your next step now, just so we're
Yeah.
clear.
I'll close the loop with Matt at Wyndham Regional Commission. I'll close the loop with the VTrans people to make sure that everything's satisfied on their end. And I'll find out if there's anything else that you as a town need to do to, document that you've accepted it.
Okay,
So I'll triple check and get back to you either way.
wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. Are there any other questions for Dan? Glad to have you, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Good. Look forward to seeing the work.
Great, thank you so much.
Take care. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, now we have unscheduled members of the public. Would anyone like to speak?
I have a quick question for Jay, before he goes.
Okay.
We were talking about applying for permission to do temporary crosswalks until this project gets
Right.
started. And we had talked about doing one at West Street and Jail Street.
Right.
Is there a way that we could also ask to do one at the Fayetteville corner to M&T Bank? Because those are existing sidewalks according to this.
What say you?
What
Jay?
I've found out so far is that we would have to meet ADA, and that would mean rebuilding the sidewalks on both sides in order to do it. So it's being run up through the chain of command, and they're going to double check that even though this is temporary, with the hopes of doing it right, whether there's any, but I don't know yet. So
Okay. But would that second location be a possibility if it looks possible? And then we have two to get started?
yes, because there is a sidewalk in both places. I don't know. It all depends on how those ADA compliant walkways tend to stick out into the road. So that may be the problem, is that I don't know. I'll be honest with you. It sounded more, I was hoping for a simpler answer than that. And it sounds like it may be difficult, but I'll know better in a week or two.
Great. Thank you, Jay.
Sure.
Okay, so moving right along to old business and follow-up items. Personnel policy changes and recommendations, you said we would need to
I
continue.
need to come back to that following week.
Town beautification suggestions, I'll say, Jeff, I did get your email about the court, and I have reached out to Reed and talked to him, and going to follow up with the judge that maybe on the common in front of the old sheriff's department, maybe 2 benches by the tree line, and maybe possible over by the tree on the front yard of the Union Hall.
Okay, that would be great.
And then there's also the spot in front of the church, which the courthouse owns. So there's several locations.
Okay. The town forest did approve a bench over there. I'll have to talk with Jay and see what that's going to look like, because there's not really a green space there yet, but I think there probably should be. That parking area and entryway could definitely use a little spruce up, and I think a bench would be a great part of that. I also reached out to the library to see if they'd be interested, thinking that might be a good spot, and Beckley's going to get back to me tomorrow and see what they think. So once we have everything solidified, then we can go forward.
Okay.
Sounds great. Sounds like now you have more options.
Yes, options are good.
Yes.
Did you get anywhere with tracking down the Brookside spot? Whose land
I did
that?
not. I've walked it a few times. I can't really think of anywhere over there that it makes a sense. I'm not sure where the bus stop
It's right at Hunter Brook where that little green space is. I just don't know whose land that is.
Maybe talk to.
right at.
I think it's, yeah, I know.
I can bring up MapQuest and let you know.
Okay.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's right at Hunter Brook. For some reason, I was thinking Adams Brook Road.
Maybe ask Beckley tomorrow when you talk to Beckley.
That is a
Okay.
bus stop where, five or more children get on every day, or most days. And people park there to go down to the brook pretty regularly. As a resident of the road, there's cars there frequently that are there during the day. It's people in the brook.
It's just
Okay.
obstructing the parking.
It's mostly gravel. It would have to be close to the road, which may not be desirable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The group space by Hunter Brook would probably be better.
Yeah. I don't know. Like everything else, I think is in floodplain. There are pretty spots down below underneath the bridge, but I don't know that we want to risk a bench to high water.
Yeah, and also kind of the goal is to keep these very visible from the road, to try to make it look like people are hanging out there, which
Yeah.
sometimes helps people slow down.
So maybe when you talk to Beckley tomorrow, you can ask her if she knows who might own that property.
Absolutely, I could do that.
Again, I just would raise the issue that I think, in my opinion, there's a problem putting it on private property.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't think we should. I think it should be all on public property.
I agree with you.
okay.
No public property down by Brookside.
Well, there's that one piece of land that we purchased back from the folks who lost their house at the corner of Hunter Brook and Rock River,
That's what I was thinking.
which would be nobody goes there currently, but that doesn't mean that they can't. Because it
True.
would be a great place to hang out and have sun.
That I can see doing.
Right.
Right at the
That's-
with the two.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think we own that land now because we had to buy it back. There's not a
Just
whole lot
confirm.
of, it's not a whole lot of land left, but it's there.
It doesn't take much.
Well, it sounds like it's coming along.
It's coming along. It's if it were only my only job, it would be so easy.
All right, anything else on the benches?
We're good for right now. By next meeting, I should have it figured out.
And anything new on the celebration?
No.
Still waiting on Newfane. I still have to get in touch with Newfane now. FEMA buyout, we do have an update.
The update I have is that, as I had said last time, we were accepted for the BRELA insurance policy, which then allowed us to look for funding for the phase 1 analysis of the tanks there at the old store. We were approved by Wyndham Regional Commission for a grant to do the phase 1 study. I just had to get a document signed by the landowner, which I received today, and then they will be able to go forward. Was looking for a consulting firm to do that research. And then when that's completed, that will give us a guideline for what we need to do for phase 2 of the brownfield remediation plan. So we're moving along.
Excellent. Any questions on that?
I had a question. What happens if FEMA says no?
If FEMA says no, then we just, at no expense to the town, we cleaned up a site that either we found out a site did not need to be cleaned up, or we cleaned up the site that needed to be cleaned up. That's the worst. Everything's being done with the homeowner's approval, so.
Okay.
All right. Any ARPA updates?
No ARPA updates.
And now we are into the floodplain river corridor bylaw proposed changes.
Jane is not on.
So we,
Where did she go?
Well, they handed it off to the Selectboard now, so now it's ours.
yes,
They finished their part, they signed off on it, and now it's our job to figure out the timing for the hearings that we need to have and to the public presentation. So this is, you all have a copy of the presentation that I put together, and that was reviewed and corrected by WRC.
okay,
And they are willing to come to our meeting when we want to have a presentation at the select board, just like they did with the planning commission. We just need to let them know when it will be scheduled for.
which will, I'll just segue right into July. We have the first week of July, we should have a meeting on July 3rd, but because it's kind of all wrapped up in one big long holiday, I don't know if people are going away. I cannot be here for July 3rd. I don't know about anybody else. We could A, do July 5, or B, switch our Mondays, since there are 5 Mondays in July, and do the 10th and the 24th. And then go back to our regular 1st and 3rd. And then while we decide that one of those days can be when we do this.
Okay, someone needs to be managing the sheet that has when certain meetings have the time frame between meetings and the sign off. So do you have that paperwork, and do you have the planning commission?
Yeah.
What they've already done?
Margot sent me one, or Mia sent me a timesheet, and with the documentation for public hearings.
Okay. And then there should also be, Kate sent us an email with what the planning commission signed off on. Okay, so we just have to be super careful about adhering to all of those deadlines.
Yeah.
So, 2 questions. Should we start this in the summer when a lot of people are bound to be away? Or should we wait until the fall? I know there is a time frame that we have to adhere to from when the planning commission signed off on it until we take it up. I believe that's fairly lengthy, but I don't know exactly what date they signed off on it. So,
Maybe we could find that out. And
They presented it to us at the May 15th meeting.
and then they signed off afterwards. And so then I think the interval she said was 6 months before we had to pick it up.
120 days, wasn't it?
So that's
4 months?
4 months, okay. So then it might be too long to put it off until September.
September is 100.
It's a little close. Maybe we should just do it over the summer. But I think we just really want to give people lots of ample warning. And I would propose putting the amended, the actual bylaw on our website along with this presentation. So
It's
that
already there.
everyone, say it again. It's already there.
It's already there.
Where is it on the website, do you know?
I had Bauman put it in a prominent place.
Well, if you could figure out where it is and in the minutes, make that very clear. And I would propose having maybe at the, a cover sheet that we post that says that this is coming up, here's where to find the information with hyperlinks, so that we get it out there.
Do you see it?
Jane also, say it again.
I'm looking to see where it is.
Jane Douglas had also said that in the next Newfane newsletter, the New Book News,
Newbrook News.
that they could put information. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm mixing that up with the emergency. Never mind. Never mind, forget that piece.
Did you mean the hazard mitigation plan? That's right up front for public comment.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that was different.
Yeah.
So this one needs to be put on.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Okay,
So go, sorry.
so just to get that on the website.
Okay.
And then I would just like bend over backwards to make this super prominent. I would put a sheet up when you post it at the various posting sites saying that this is coming up, and I don't want anyone to feel like they didn't have a chance to weigh in.
Right. And then we'll have it on discussion at our next meeting, and then we'll plan for our the hearing at our next meeting.
Well, at the next meeting, then maybe we lay out what all if you would pull up the document that has to be adhered to and figure out what all the dates would be and lay those all out for us at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then we'd be able to tell Alyssa when we want her to come in and let everyone in town know when these various meetings are going to take place.
Perfect. So with that being said, when shall we have our next select board meeting? Because of the 4th of July holiday. How does everyone feel? Jeff, what do you have going on?
I will be at a music festival from the 10th to the 15th.
Okay.
And I don't think they have service there, so I won't be able to zoom in. But I could do so.
But you could do the 5th?
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay. Anne?
I can do the 5th.
Katie?
I can do either.
So do we need a motion to change the day, or can we just change the day?
We can just change the day.
So Mike, when I spoke with him earlier, said the 5th was fine or the other way was fine. So shall we just keep it for July 5?
Yeah, then we're only switching one meeting.
And then we will be regular. So it'll be July 5 and July 17. Great.
Okay.
Yes.
As far as the public meeting for this.
We'll decide that once we have the document that has all the timelines on it.
Okay.
So probably July 5th.
This will go all the think it's like multiple stages you go through, so.
Yes.
Because there's a 15-day warning of the public hearing,
Right,
and it's very concise, very detailed.
right. I was overwhelmed when I read it.
Okay, so-
WRC can help verify if you do it, if you figure out what the dates are, and then maybe check with Alyssa and make sure we got it right.
And
Okay.
then we can go forward.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it takes 3 days before, from the time I send it to the reformer before it appears.
Yes.
yeah.
Don't want to mess it up.
No, we really don't.
So
We really don't.
July 5, we will discuss further. And number 7, what to do in an emergency information. Anne had drawn up a flyer that she sent to me. Is that the, yeah, that I will send out to everyone. I thought it was really great.
It needs to be finalized. I mean, like putting sort of what I thought people were asking for at the meeting that we had a couple of months ago. And then there were places I didn't know the answer. So maybe between you and Renetta and Jay, those could be, it could be completed. What I sent to you is definitely
It's just a draft, right?
Definitely needs another set of eyes to finalize.
So the 3 of us can get together and talk about it, and then at the next meeting approve it.
Yeah,
Maybe perhaps once we discuss it, we can send it back out. Anything else on number 7? All right, moving right along. Any new business? Anyone? Correspondence?
None.
All right, and then we'll move into pay orders. I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight, and have a good evening.